Welcome to the Nurse Mark Podcast, where we talk about everything health, happiness, cannabis. We'll delve into all aspects of what it means to live a powerful, healthy life. Everything from exercise to nutrition to mindfulness, and how to use cannabis as a means to alleviate some of the most common health issues we face. My motivation and passion come from the fact that I personally had to explore all these areas to deal with lifelong depression and mood disorder. For me, it's personal. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey, folks, welcome to this week's episode of the Nurse Mark Podcast. My guest this week is Dr. Denise Foster. Now, Denise has been in the professional nursing industry for over 35 years, beginning in the bedside and orthopedic and critical care. She transitioned to home care and saw the power of the cannabis plant during the HIV/AIDS epidemic that swept the nation in the 1980s. She's been an advocate since then. She's now involved in the entrepreneurial world of retail hemp and will be opening a Hemp Haven store in Chesapeake, Virginia, where she lives. So she is an expert in cannabis, in the endocannabinoid system. And we have the opportunity to chat this week in depth about what the industry is doing these days with the coronavirus pandemic, what she's seen at the bedside, how she's seen people utilize this, and some of the things that, maybe we should be aware of and just focus on a little bit more. So you're going to really like this episode. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, folks, welcome to the Nurse Mark Podcast with your host, Nurse Mark. And I have as a guest this week, Dr. Denise Foster. Hello, Denise. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
So glad to have you here. You have such a wide variety of things in your background. And now, you're in, I would consider you one of the top players in the cannabis field is when it comes to the nursing side of things. I really do. And
thank you.
A whole ton of respect for what you've done in the space and being part of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, which we'll talk about. But let's talk about what's going on in the cannabis space now. Let's talk about that.
There are so many rabbit holes to go down right now.
Yeah.
We can start with the most pressing, which of course is this pandemic, the COVID-19, which we are, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on. And in many cases, you're either in a lockdown situation or you're moving about already. You're in a medical field where you are under attack because you're working all the time, or you're not. So with medical marijuana, it's interesting that we have seemed to have come full circle with redefining medical marijuana as being an essential service. That was a big question as I kind of looked at the landscape when things were shutting down. And I don't know about you, but in my state, in Virginia, of course, the liquor stores stayed open.
What's your take on that, by the way? I think it was a public health move. I think they didn't want a whole bunch of detoxing people to step into the ER.
I really do. I think it had many different levels of that decision, including financial.
Sure.
Of course, in our state, that's where a majority of, or at least where some of the taxes come from, and as the Commonwealth of Virginia controls the liquor sales. But I do think on some degree it was medicinal because you can't get the same percentage of volume, ABV, right, the alcohol by volume, and from wine or beer. So that's a concern. But that was very interesting to watch as states who had already legalized medical marijuana had made the decision to keep those dispensaries open. Right. So we've transitioned from back to the 1930s where we've made it completely prohibited and still Schedule I. So there's your other dichotomy. There's your other juxtaposition. We have it on Schedule I as a nothing medicinal value of it at all on Schedule 1 yet to their need for medicine. So we're still living in what I call the schizophrenic United States of cannabis.
That's a good term. I like that. I might even use that from now on. It's true. It's true.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've seen that they were considered essential. Now, in my state of Massachusetts, where I'm at now, we have a robust recreational adult use market, and that was not considered essential, and that was shut down. So it was just medical. So what do you think we saw? We saw a huge increase in the amount of people who were applying for medical cannabis cards, because there are people out there. I mean, do you think that this is true? Do you think that a lot of the adult use market in these rec states are really just people using it as a medicine on their own, right? It just
absolutely, and that goes back to the question, or that goes back to the underlying foundational argument: is all use medicinal use? That's a question that hasn't been explored deeply enough yet, which would then possibly negate these arguments for medicinal versus recreational. If you're going to tax it evenly across the board. If you're going to recommend it evenly across the board. Let's stop playing around with this. There's one side recreational, that's beer and wine and a little bit of marijuana, cannabis on the side, versus actual empirical use of cannabis. So we are so in our infancy. But you mentioned Massachusetts, where you are, and I was just reading this morning about how there are several Massachusetts marijuana companies, cannabis companies, now going under because of this. It is amazing. And on the opposite side of that coin, I read a few days ago where even despite the lockdown in Oklahoma as a state left theirs open, and in the month that they were reduced related to this response, they had their biggest sale volume ever.
Oh yeah.
So states are always greedy for that almighty tax dollar, and I think they're going to start recognize. I think it's going to be an economic push.
I agree, and I've had that conversation with a lot of different people in the space, and we're all in agreement that it's going to be an economic push that's going to start to have other states maybe consider having an adult use market, because they need the tax revenue.
Absolutely. Follow the money.
Yeah, follow the money. So, I think that, this sort of shutdown on the adult use side in Massachusetts forced more of a move into the medical, but also into the black market space again. I mean, people just picked up where they left off, 4 years ago, or however long. Yeah, it was like 2 years ago when it really opened up. And so that's an unintended consequence that we don't want to see, right? We want, I'm all for regulated use, right?
Safe use, right? Safe, appropriate, clean medicine. Know what you're buying.
Yes.
We don't need any spices or K's in there.
No.
We don't need any of the dangerous substances.
No, and that's true. That's exactly right. So, as time goes on, a lot of people have talked about this being sort of similar to when alcohol came off of prohibition. Like there was a time period where it was just kind of up in the air. We didn't know how, states regulated all these different regulations. It's sort of homogenous across the board. I mean, you can get alcohol in all 50 states, right? But different sort of mechanisms of control, but still it's available. Do you see that happening, in the cannabis space as time moves on?
I do, and I think you're going to see some of the more. I hate to use canned terms like liberal and conservative, but you have to look at them from a fiscal perspective.
Right.
And then of course you also have to look at the populations. What happens here on the East Coast, it might not work in Wyoming. So there are so many. I'm a big proponent of chaos theory. Chaos theory underpins everything. And so what that means is that there are so many variables that we know, but there are even more variables that we don't know. And we can't predict, like you said, this unintended consequences.
Right.
So, you almost have to allow it to roll out naturally, kind of organically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, using our lovely cannabis lexicon.
That's great.
So you allow it to just develop with your grassroots, your grassroots movements.
Right.
I love being a part of the grassroots movements here in Virginia and getting it before our state legislator and then taking it to Washington for the national legislation. So I think I think within the next 5 years, I would predict that it's going to be at least to the level of medicinal across the country,
at a federal level.
And that's perfectly fine for me too, because that's where we need to start. We need to start recognizing and understanding the data.
Yes.
If we're going to see how this works with our body's own physiology and the effects in both positive and negative, we need to start taking note of what works and what doesn't, and how to advise our patients and our communities. And
we do. And that's thank you for mentioning that. So, there's this feeling within, I've been to MJ Biz and I've been in sort of like from the business side of things, being an entrepreneur in the past, I was really focused on sort of that side. And then being a nurse, I'm focused on the medical side. So I think in the community in general, there's this proclivity to ignore the negative side of things and really talk all about the positives. Let's just talk about the positives. But there are some negatives associated with it, like drug interaction is a real thing. And I don't think that that's talked enough about and that people don't know about it. I sat with a friend of mine, Denise, and she's in her mid-60s and a dear friend. And she is diabetic and she's been on Coumadin, which is, a blood thinner for people who don't know. She's been on Coumadin for quite a while. And we had lunch. We hadn't seen each other in a bit. And she knew I was in the cannabis space now. And we had lunch and she's been using the products, bought at a dispensary in Massachusetts for a year or so for pain and other things. And she's, we were talking, she's brought all her stuff with her and she's had the CBD and the THC and she, different products. And she said, but I can't figure out why my Coumadin levels are just going crazy. Like we can't get them straight. They're up, they're down. We don't know what. I said, oh, let's just start right from the beginning. Yeah. We have to make sure that your doctor's aware of all of the things that you're taking, because this is what's happening. And I explained it to her that it was a specific drug interaction.
Absolutely.
So do you see the same thing?
Yeah, I see confirmation bias. I belong to lots of different forums and lots of different, I guess I have a finger in pie and of a lot of different medical things. And I have to be, because as my role as a college educator, nursing professor, I have to kind of be contemporary on top of what's happening in the clinical world.
Absolutely.
So what you see in any forum is a confirmation bias. And so you mentioned this MJ Biz. The one thing that I do recognize is that industry versus medicinal, they do have kind of an overlap, but they have different purposes. They really do have different purposes.
Absolutely.
And so when you get into that confirmation bias, where you mentioned like the discounting of side effects related to the drug interactions, that's a real thing that the business, sure, we want to promote good quality medical products, but we also need to consider that these products will interact in the body, and we're also starting to see more as more medicinal marijuana is being prescribed or used throughout the communities. For instance, just a few days ago, Duke University published their story that says that the use of THC by men of procreation age, so men who are going to be fathers, it does affect behavior through the generations. And so, and we've already had this concern about medical marijuana use in pregnant mothers, and more. So these are our vulnerable populations that, if you're of a I would say, a paternal age, more likely you're going to be visiting a conference like MJ Biz and hearing all about these wonderful products and wonderful chemovars, aka strains, and what they can do for you. but are they sharing research that's coming out, like from Duke University, like
They
saying,
are
okay,
not.
well, if you're planning on being a dad or you're
Yeah.
planning on being a mom,
Mhm.
these are the things you should know about using high THC products.
Right.
So again, we're looking at it needs to coalesce. We need to have these same purposes. And I think there's a happy medium for both, or a middle ground. I don't know what that looks like yet. And we won't know until we see more states coming on board and more research, empirical, vetted, evidence-based research coming forward.
Which I'm excited about. You mentioned it earlier, the ABV, so the alcohol by volume. Similar to that, do you think the products that are on the marketplace now, because they have no upper limit or very little upper limit as to how much THC in each product, do you see in the future that will be limited in some fashion, similar to like an 80 or 100 proof alcohol?
That's a great question. I don't think so. And I'll tell you why I don't think so. I think they may put a restriction on it, a cap, but I think it's kind of self-regulating. When I work with patients and their families, when they consult with me regarding their use of medicinal cannabis, one of the first questions, of course, to ask is, why do you want to use it? And when they talk about, inflammation or diabetes, or they talk about anxiety or stress or autism or seizures, I'm not going to point them to the high THC volumes. That's not appropriate. So when you think about, why do we recommend or educate related to the use of THC, we're looking at those very specific parameters, those symptoms, the appetite, nausea, vomiting, and pain. We're looking at those receptors in the CNS. So there then becomes a happy ground. We know that you can't overdose on THC, so that's the best thing. But on the other side of that, if, let's say, you're a hospice or palliative care patient, and you want to have those remaining days pain-free with a good appetite and no nausea, but you also want to be awake to interact with your family.
Yes.
So you don't want to THC to the point where you are sleeping all the time.
Right.
So I don't want to see a cap, because everyone's THC point, right, that sweet spot, everyone's THC set point is individual. So I wouldn't want to see a cap to that. And that's why I say that it's more than likely self-regulatory, in that, I took, too much THC, so I slept for 3 days. I'm not going to do that again. Let's cut that down.
It is different than alcohol, because alcohol is a different drug.
Absolutely.
It's metabolized different, and it's just a different drug in the body. So there is that for sure. Yeah. So how long have you been working with cannabis as a medicine?
Probably more about 5 years.
Yeah.
3 to 5 years. But I have to go back, of course, because actually I worked with cannabis as medicine back in the 1980s when we first had the HIV and AIDS crisis come out. And I was a home health nurse at that time too. In fact, that was when PICC lines first came out. I got certified to install PICC lines in the home. That was a crazy time before they moved it back into the clinical setting. But a lot of the patients that I saw to install PICC lines, where they were receiving these high dose antibiotics. We didn't have the retroviral
you didn't have the cocktail
medications. We didn't have those. We didn't have the heart drugs. So we had just the regular antibiotics to go through the PICC line. But all the patients were on some form of marijuana, either the dronabinol for the pill, or they were receiving, at the time, it was still receiving the tins of cannabis cigarettes every month.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Is that how the feds distributed it?
Absolutely. They did.
Pre-rolls.
Absolutely. And so I live in an area near Norfolk where there was a very engaging gay population, and so we always were seeing these patients, and if they were not on medical marijuana, and I'd sit there and talk with them, and that became part of their treatment plan. As we discussed and reviewed all their medicines, and when I found a patient that was not receiving or was having side effects like the pain and appetite problems, anxiety and sleep, of course, was a big one. I would say, well, let's talk to your doctor about getting you on these medical marijuana programs, because back at the time it was compassionate use, right? It was compassionate use. And so we did a lot of, helped them facilitate a lot of certificates for compassionate use. So then, of course, it went underground. That compassionate use program went away, and then got reintroduced to it through my best friend, and whose own son had his own struggles, and I was like, well, the time has come. The time really has come, and it's good to see how it's been very interesting to see how the communities have embraced it, and of course, we're still going to have the naysayers, but for the most part, the reception has been positive.
I agree. I encounter far more people who are, on the positive side of things, are curious, even
curious. I was going to say inquisitive.
Yeah, inquisitive. Right. Yeah. And I get questions all the time about, well, how does it work? Does it work? Someone told me that they've been using it, and the population that I've been working with have been people who are in assisted living and in those types of communities.
The number one population to use the cannabis.
Yes. Well, yeah, absolutely. Because stuff hurts, right?
Absolutely. Stuff hurts.
If you're lucky to live that long, stuff starts to hurt. So it makes sense. Right. That's right. And it's fascinating. So what are you doing these days? I mean, you said you have your finger in a lot of different pies. Let's talk about what pies your fingers are in, because it sounds really cool. Like I know you have the ACNA that you've been involved in for how long now?
I did that for 2 years. Had a great time, learned a lot, met a lot of great people. I think, saw just a great reception as the valid, right? The real nursing organizations, like the ANA and the NCSBN. They started to give the ACNA a hat tip, like, okay, you're not a bunch of crazy people out there just thinking that marijuana should be legal for everybody. It does have a valid place in nursing, because the NCSBN came out with that regulation back in 2018, mandating that all nurses need to learn it.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it an amazing time to be in this field?
It is. And I just love the reaction that I get when I tell people that, yes, I'm a cannabis nurse. And it's like, whoa.
I get the same thing. People say, what? Tell me more. Was there such a thing?
I had somebody ask me, said, so I didn't see that on my college majors. How can I go back and get one of those majors?
Yeah.
We're working on that.
That's right. It's totally. So tell me, what are you doing in the educational space with this? You actively working, educating on cannabis in the
I was teaching at one of the colleges, yes, and I developed a course for the endocannabinoid system. That's where my love is. I'm an empiricist, and when I taught in front of the classroom, I was the professor you love to hate. I taught the hard sciences, the A&P, the pathophysiology, the pharmacology. The students just hated me.
You're talking my language now.
Facts is facts.
Love that stuff.
Facts is facts. I didn't make this work this way. It's a fact. And as a nurse, you have to know that. So that's where my passion lies, is understanding down to the cellular level. What is going on? And that's one of my crazy discoveries, my crazy aha moments. Not only was I floored when I learned that the government owns the patent to cannabis as medicine.
In 2003.
I was also floored when I discovered this system called the endocannabinoid system. I teach A&P, I teach patho and pharm. Why haven't I been instructing my students in this? I felt cheated.
And it's been since the 90s, right?
I felt
so in the
cheated
early
and lied to.
90s, we discovered
Absolutely.
this amazing, this amazing system of receptors in the body, one of the largest, impactful in almost everything. I think the NIH actually came out and said at one point, we believe that the endocannabinoid system is involved in every disease state. I mean, that was a statement.
Absolutely. I mean, come on. When we talk about how inflammation is responsible for all of the disorders and dysfunction. That's
exactly right.
I felt cheated. So what's good to know, the NCSBN is, of course, at the forefront in their regulations for nursing guidelines. But, as any profession is slow to change, the AMA is going through the same thing. It just takes a while to get this empirical data, this research as evidence-based practice into the educational programs. I remember when I was sending out resumes, and I was just a member of ACNA, and I was kind of hesitant to put that as a credential, as a part of my professional organizations, thinking, they're not going to hire me. Well, at one point, once I said to my kids, I'm a cannabis nurse, the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, and I started promoting it on my resume and listing my my organizational relationships and accomplishments. And I have to honestly say, I've been very successful because of that, because I think more schools are starting to take note of the fact that, at least in the nursing side, that we do have a duty not to promote it as medicine, so to speak. No. We have a duty to understand it as medicine.
Of course.
And so I teach in a few programs where I'm happy to say that we have at least an article or a discussion about medical marijuana, especially in relation to care of the elderly and care of the hospice and palliative care population, because that's where we're seeing most of the inquiries.
Right.
So if you're going to be taking a geriatric or a hospice palliative approach to nursing care, more than likely, if your patients are living in a state where it's available medicinally, the nurse is going to be asked about it.
Absolutely.
So it's slowly transitioning into the colleges, and that's a good thing.
And that's one of my loves is hospice. And I was on a board of a hospice for a while back before I even became a nurse. And so, I absolutely love hospice and the work that they do. And I finished my bachelor's. I finished my 60-hour clinical rotation was in hospice.
That's great.
I had connections, right?
Hospice is such a unique field.
It is a unique field, and in such a great place for there's a role for cannabis within the
absolutely
hospice.
And most of the patients' families are the ones that bring up the discussion.
Yeah.
And then it just blossoms from there. And then that's where that question that you said about the THC cap. Well, our hospice population, we shouldn't be capping them. It's based on their need.
That's exactly right.
Right. It's based on their need, and too much is not going to create a very bad adverse effect, but it's going to, again, self-limit them. They're going to say, well, that was just too much, so let's cut it back a little bit.
Right. And I've had a lot of anecdotal feedback from families whose loved ones have used cannabis to where they could decrease the amount of opiates that they use towards the end. And they were lucid. So they got to a point where they could, all the way to almost the last day. I had one family say, you know what, Mom wanted to take a drive the day before she passed away. That's a direct result of her using cannabis.
Being alert
and able to interact with people all the way to the end, which is magical and special.
Absolutely. And that's why we're seeing this huge movement, and why it's remained essential. The states cannot grant this type of treatment to people like in hospice. We still have people in hospice. That didn't stop. No. And then take it away. That's cruel and inhumane. So that's why it's essential.
It absolutely is. Yeah, and that's why it's essential. So do you think that that really was, I mean, we talked about it right in the beginning, that it was like a really strong point that it remained an essential service. Do you think that that's really going to be another stake in the ground that says, hey, you recognize that this is essential, so let's have the conversation more on a federal level, right?
Yeah, I think this is a pinpoint, a pivotal moment, and even national organizations like Normal. Normal at first were, if you see the history of Normal was first for all just legalization across the board.
Right.
Then they started more honing in on the medicinal side, recognizing that if we're gonna legalize it, we need to legalize it, which is then going to again, as medicine, which is then going to again prompt the question, well, is all use medicinal use?
Right.
And once we get to that point where we can get to that basic foundational question, then we can make some decisions, and then we can regulate it. And if you're over 21, just like I don't know, some states might be 18, right? But if you're over 21, you show them your ID and, boom, you're just like liquor or alcohol.
Yeah.
And then, based on, do we have a screening or, these are questions that we're going to have to ask, because we're finding that it's not really so much the THC as it is the other cannabinoids that are really the pharmacologically active players.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great? I'm in the first class at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy and
good for you.
Cannabis, and I'm absolutely loving it because it has that empirical data, right? So we're working with good, solid stuff, research.
That's good to know. I'm gonna. I've written a couple recommendations for students to get into that program, and so I'm going to add you to my list of resources to get some feedback about the evaluation of the program.
I talk to aspiring students all the time because I raise my hand whenever I'm in any program. I'm like, if I'm in, I'm in, and so I talk to a lot of prospective students about what the program's like, what the curriculum's like, the workload is. Those are the questions that you get, of course.
And they just started a cohort, didn't they?
Yeah.
They're getting, because I remember I had to fill in some recommendation forms, and it was like during this time before the class opened. So, you're going to be
We just finished the first year. The first cohort finished the first year, and they've accepted the second. So they're going to start.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Good to know.
Fabulous stuff. And it's just, I have to say, Denise, that the diversity within the student population for this particular course, it's more diverse than I've in any college education, any college classes that I've taken. And it's from, it's nurses, pharmacists, physicians, social justice people, people who have no health background at all, but it's just such a wide, diverse group. It's great. It's fabulous.
That's what I loved when I was teaching with the cannabis, is that I was in with massage therapists and doctors of acupuncture. And I was learning just as much from them as I was about, the cannabis medicine. But I think that you bring up a great point, is that we're going to see with the empirical data, that is a level of education that is reserved for higher college level learning, again, which, is all led by your governing boards, your professional boards. So we're going to probably come to a point in the timeline of cannabis where there's a professional cannabis oversight organization to rule them all, so to speak. Because we're going to have standards. You mentioned THC caps. Not that should be a standard or a guideline.
But there should be guidelines.
But there should be, absolutely. Just like we have best practices, there needs to be a forum for that development. And where that comes from, of course, are in our institutions of higher learning. And so that's why I think approaching cannabis from the medicinal side is so important, because it's there where we are able to do our our laboratory testing and really use the tools and equipment to measure, when, this mind-blowing measuring the endocannabinoid system in the central nervous system, in the spinal fluid, right? How much anandamide do you have in your spinal canal to measure your endocannabinoid tone? That's phenomenal. And
it is.
that type of data is what's going to help. We call it data layering. That is foundational data. When you are able to promote and disseminate data like that you can measure endocannabinoid tone from the central spinal cord, that is going to just ripple the other layers of data. All right, well, how can we use this for mental health? How can we use this for immune response and inflammatory response? How can we use this for thyroid, hormonal control?
It's the base.
Oh, it is.
And from that, everything else can spring.
Absolutely. And so that's why it's so exciting. And I love research. I'm a research geek. And I just inhale it all. And the discoveries that are being made are just phenomenal. And more and more disciplines we're coming out of the silos, because we're all interested in one thing. We're all interested in holistic elevation of well-being and how to either get there. If you're not sick, you don't want to get sick, but you want to maintain your wellness,
right?
Or restore wellness. How do we?
That's what I tell people all the time. What's the best way to heal someone? Prevent the disease in the first place.
Absolutely.
Right?
So and so that's why this is such a revolutionary concept. We and I always teach. I've always taught that our healthcare and at least in our country is based on the medical reactive model. We have all of these tools at our disposal: parks, recreation, exercise, eat right. Don't do this, do this. We don't follow it, and then we expect, when we do become diseased or dysfunctional, we expect a pill or a surgery to magically make it all better.
Right. That has been the expectation.
And I think this pandemic has been a huge wake-up call for people who have not been doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And what an amazing opportunity. I mean, it's horrible and it's wonderful at the same time. It's always the yin and yang. So there are so many positive things that are possible that come from this.
Absolutely. And that's why
we just have to recognize it.
Cannabis is just one of the many things, and and talking cannabis. I'm using that broad term, right? Where we are questioning, what does it mean to be in cannabis? Because cannabis, either hemp or the actual cannabis plant itself, they both have their place. But we're seeing, as CBD has just been regulated in many states. In Virginia, last month, it was signed into a bill that regulated as a food additive.
So there you go. So now, actually, I think that's one of the first states that I've heard that have actually not waited for the FDA to come out and say, hey, this is grass, this is food, good to go. Right, because the FDA is just so busy doing other things, especially at this point.
Right now,
they are not focused on anything else. So kudos to Virginia for actually coming out and saying, this is a food additive. Here we go.
And that is due. I have to give the hemp. We have a hemp coalition here in Virginia. I love working with them as well. So it's that two-pronged approach, right? The Farm Bill came through in 2018.
Yep.
That was due to the large hemp. The hemp industry pushing for that. And now, the Hemp Coalition of Virginia, we've been pushing, the governors, the powers that be to, make it available, because it's
especially for the southern states in the Mid-South, I mean,
absolutely.
Tobacco was the cash crop forever, and that's gone, right?
Absolutely.
So we got huge farming capacity, great farmland, great intellect in the farm intellect, right? The experience.
Absolutely.
Hemp is a great crop for that to take over.
When I in the hemp coalition, I do talk to a lot of different hemp farmers, and the funny thing is that a lot of them were hops farmers. So hops to
Similar
go into
plant, right?
Hops to go into beer,
Yes.
right? And so now they're transitioning their farms from hops to hemp.
Yeah.
And so this wave of hemp and medicinal and industrial things that are going to come from hemp are just going to they're going to complement any medicinal cannabis, because not everybody's going to want to go get a medicinal cannabis card.
That's right. Then that's what we found in the states, the 11 states, District of Columbia. We found that once they have an adult use option, most people don't go. The medical side starts to decline because most people say, I don't want to have the conversation. I don't want to. They go and do it on themselves. Well, how nice is that hemp is being pushed in the state where it actually all started?
That's true. Jamestown. Good.
You were required. To grow hemp. This is coming full circle. Oh, that's fabulous.
So it's essential and it's coming home.
It is coming home.
Absolutely.
It's where it all started.
Yes. And amazing. we have great soil. Great hemp products are already here. And I'm really excited to explore this landscape. And the nice thing is, of course, versus medical marijuana, you don't need your card, and you just need to be educated and coached on what you need. Most of the patients that I have been in contact with, I would say at least over the last year, very few of them have wanted to get their medical marijuana cards when we discuss the whole, why do you want to use this product? Right. And once they're educated, I steer them to some quality CBD products, and they're completely happy. Happy.
Yeah, of course they are. And I went, Denise, I went to Tel Aviv last September for a medical marijuana conference. And it was, I would say that Israel is probably the epicenter of most of the real high quality, solid scientific research that's been done. And, so we have all these high-end researchers who have spent their careers doing cannabis research, presenting. And what shocked me was that the majority of the research that they're doing is not on THC. It's on CBD.
Absolutely. CBD.
And when they explained it, it made perfect sense, because most people are going to want to use something that's non-intoxicating.
Absolutely.
But has efficacy. It works.
Absolutely.
So it was an amazing.
When the more that I went down those rabbit holes, and the more that I dug into the risk, is of course a minor player. And a major player, depending on what you use it for, but it's a minor player in relation to the physiological effects of the other cannabinoids. And the king of the other cannabinoids, even though it's the lesser amount, is the CBD. Yeah. And so the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, in Virginia, at least, we're still waiting for our medical marijuana program to be operationalized. We're still waiting we call them pharmaceutical processors here. We have 5 for the whole entire state.
Wow.
Very, very, very spread out, even though we lobbied for more. So that has yet to be incepted. In the meantime, CBD is available. And when you look at the bigger picture, more people should have access and understand how this CBD affects well-being.
Right.
Than the use of a substance, THC, that may or may not be appropriate for a condition. So It's amazing when you do look at CBD and all of the things it does, either as an oil, as an essential hemp seed oil, for your own body's omega-3 fats, to balance the fat, the trans fats, or you go into the processed CBD with the cannabinoids added to it, related to the immune and inflammatory, the diabetes, the heart disease, even the stress, the anxiety. It just is a wonder. It's a wonder compound.
It is, isn't it?
And I'm getting the range of age groups. I'm getting from pediatric age through high school. I had one parent want to talk to me about using it for her son who's bound for college next fall, all the way up to your older people who are able to use it safely because it doesn't have that intoxicating effect.
Exactly.
And I don't have to worry about counseling them about their blood pressure, et cetera, and making sure that they're not, going to have an additional fall related to safety. So it's an incredible time to understand the science, and I'm a very much big believer in karma and the yin and the yang, the big wheel. As it spins around and back. So we have to just be where we are and look at all of the wonderful things that are happening because of a plant. It's really mind-blowing,
isn't it?
Without being inebriated, to see that it's here it is, 2020, 50 years later. It is now, even more than that, 80 years later. It is now essential medicine. So we're back to where it was on the pharmacy shelves.
If they only listened to the AMA in 1937, we'd be so much further down the road.
And if everyone, I keep telling everybody, I said, everybody should just be on CBD, because then we wouldn't be in this pandemic situation.
Everybody be calm.
Everybody be calm. Everyone's immune system, inflammatory system would be appropriately responding to these interleukins and interferons that are, viral stimulating. And so, you balance the CBD against these transitions that your body is making to maintain homeostasis, and we may be in a different place if that was the case.
That's right. There's the word, homeostasis. Yeah, all of these conditions that are the primary conditions that people are having issues with the COVID-19 disease. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Let me ask you a question. Not even cannabis related, but let's talk about another. I don't even want to call it a plant, a fungi. Let's talk about the psychedelics. They seem to be the new kid on the block.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, we have cannabis and people are starting to feel comfortable with that. And then out of nowhere, not out of nowhere, some of us knew about it. Out of nowhere, the psychedelics come in. And now there's this huge burgeoning interest in psychedelics as medicine, especially in the mental health space. My gosh.
It all goes back to the Ayurvedic medicines, right? Plants are around us for a reason. They feed everything.
65% of drugs are plant derived anyway.
That's right, but they're synthetically derived.
Yes.
So when you're talking plants, you're looking at neem and moringa, the mushrooms. These are all natural plants, natural things that have for some reason evolved to be able to interact physiologically and pharmacologically with our own body. So what's interesting is we're going back to the timing when all of this was made illegal. What happened? It was removed from our diets. It was removed from our way of life, our lifestyle. You couldn't get it on your pizza, or you couldn't go buy it at the store.
Think about what was lost like 2 generations ago. I think about what my great-grandparents knew of using plants as medicine, using other things as medicine, because you didn't have this organized healthcare for profit environment, right?
No,
so they had to make do and figure out stuff. There was a lot of sort of homegrown.
Everybody had digoxin, foxglove in their garden. Everybody had the bark of a willow tree that they steep for their tea, willow tree tea.
Right.
So the holistic movement is now gaining in its popular notions that we're tired of pharmaceuticals. Number one, we're tired of a pill, and we're also concerned about. Of course, Dr. Russo talks about this clinical endocannabinoid deficiency, where
as a concept, as
animals, crop animals that used to graze on things and eat mushrooms and hemp and who knows what else they used to eat. But then we removed all of that from their diets because we couldn't have that. And
Right.
so we have seen not only the escalation of these diseases, these disorders and dysfunctional systems that are imbalanced. The homeostasis is now moving toward a disease state.
Mm.
And we are also seeing, and that's just the physiological, physical effects. We also are recognizing that mental health, spiritual health, it also plays a role in well-being.
It does.
And
Huge role.
we've been discounting mental health for too long.
Oh,
And didn't you learn in nursing school that all patients are psych patients?
yes, of course.
Okay, so we're all
Yes.
psych patients. So we're all
we are. Come on, it's the human condition.
We're
it's
all
part and parcel.
We're all psych patients, and
Yes.
if we and the synthetics for psychs, the synthetic for psychiatric concerns are, in my opinion, a nightmare, and that's from personal experience. I'm sure everyone has.
Oh, and listen, I have 25 years of personal experience, and I also have chatted with a ton of psychiatrists who are all like, we do the best we can.
Yes, but in that you're reconfiguring the body's own chemicals. And as I used to teach in pathophysiology, when you affect one system, it's not a system unto itself.
It is not.
It interconnects with everything else.
Yeah,
Thank you, mind maps. It all cascades throughout the body's systems itself. And so if we can find something like mushrooms, the psychedelics that are actually working in our mental health population, which is where they are much, much needed, because we don't have much to offer. We don't have a lot of hope to offer to our mental health population.
No. And, if you look at the numbers, of the pharmaceuticals, that how much of an effect they have, how much of the population of a particular diagnosis, it's always very low.
Oh, very low.
Yeah, it's very low.
Their efficacy is horrible.
Yes.
And the side effects are
just awful. Side
effects are worse. Absolutely. So I think, again, going back to being essential medicine, the fact that cannabis was now being accepted throughout the states as a medicine, number one.
Yep.
And even with the small amounts of THC that are being provided, we weren't having this dramatic, oh my gosh, we've let the Pandora out of the box moment. It's been regulated. It's been controlled. We're, of course, looking at the social determinants of health that throughout, for instance, are we seeing the increase in teenage use? Are we seeing increases in driver fatalities or accidents?
We're watching it.
Things of that. Absolutely. So we're looking at very cautiously at all of these other variables that those unintended consequences may have had. And they're not showing us the level of severity that was anticipated, or maybe not anticipated. But with that, it opened the door for, all right, well, let's see, one psychedelic is working.
Yes.
Let's try it for another one.
Let's
take advantage of this opportunity and start to do some real research, because they're not the bad guys that they've been made out to be.
Right. It's exciting.
All plants have a place in medicine. And
agreed.
we need to get away from these synthetics that are just doing havoc to the body's
wreaking
systems.
Havoc. Yeah. Because of their specificity and just not. There's so many different factors in play because we're such a complex animal.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Fascinatingly so.
I used to open my lectures in pathophysiology. Take a look at your cells right now. It's a wonder you were born normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So many things and pathways could have gone wrong. And you don't know that they haven't yet.
Right.
It could be a little time bomb somewhere down the road.
You don't know. You're right. You're absolutely right.
So this is why we need to get everybody on CBD.
That's right.
Let's regulate that stuff.
Let's get it into the mainstream. I couldn't agree more. Oh my gosh, this has been absolutely fabulous, Denise.
Well, thank you. I think so too. I love
chatting with you.
Love to talk about this science because it is so exciting and it's so interesting. The daily discoveries that come out are just phenomenal.
You know what? And I'm going to reserve the right to reach out to you again to have another conversation, and we'll do a deep dive into some of the science behind it, because
cool.
I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see I'm getting excited about it already. Yay. So, before we wrap this up, do you want to give any contact info? Do you have any, I know that you are in a lot of different areas. Do you want to give a website, anything like that? We're going to have it all up on the show notes for folks as usual. We put it up in the show notes, but if you want to share anything now, feel free.
I guess the only thing I have exciting going for me right now is I've decided to take an entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm opening up a Hemp Haven. It's a franchise based out of Missouri, and I'll be the first one on the East Coast. And be selling all types of hemp products, but I'm hand selecting the CBD products that I'll be offering, and that's it was down for about a month as we waited, for this storm to pass by. Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping to be open by the middle of June, and and we have a franchise, hemphaven.store, that I think you'll have in your show notes. But what's exciting about this is the entity that I have been fortunate enough to be introduced to through another cannabis nerd, Matt Cascio. He turned me on to these people, and their model for products is phenomenal. Their belief in education and care of their community is phenomenal. When I went out there to visit and to train, it was just quite evident that they're not doing this just to be in business. They're doing this because they care. Yes. And the nice thing about this is that they are doing their own Missouri hemp grows. They were awarded several of the Missouri licenses to grow hemp just recently, and then they'll be making their own products, which is, I think, why they were excited for me to be part of the team, because I'm going to help to inform them about that. I'm going to be in Missouri, I think, quite frequently. I've been working. I'm now in the process of getting ready to work with a medical dispensary that was awarded 5 licenses in Missouri, and I'm going to be part of their team as we open later this year. So there's going to be a lot of exciting things happening for me, I think, in both the retail CBD side and the medical dispensary side later this year. So I'm pretty excited about the ability to help patients and the communities live healthier lives. I think that's just the main reason that I want to be at the forefront of this, is to make sure that we do, as a nurse, we have this very sacred, for lack of a better word, position. Yes. Where if we are out there as the mouthpiece, as the speaker, or the believer, we have to back up our beliefs and what we say by using our trust in the profession. So it's very important to use the science and to use it appropriately.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, congratulations on all the new things you have going on.
Yeah, it's exciting.
We will definitely talk again.
Sure. Absolutely, Mark. It was great talking to you, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Denise. And folks, thanks for listening in. This has been another episode of the Nurse Mark Podcast, and that is a wrap. Hey, folks, thanks for listening into this week's episode of the Nurse Mark Podcast with my guest, Dr. Denise Foster. What a great conversation we had about all sorts of different things within the cannabis industry, and specifically within the community of people who are using it medically. It was really great to hear about all of her experiences over the past number of years that she's been an advocate for cannabis as a medicine. And I'm really excited about where things are going. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, today is the only day you have. Make it the best day ever.